welcome to Ponder and Practice, the podcast for professional, high-achieving women who are ready to swap hustle for harmony, exhaustion for energy, and pain for power. I'm Dr. Katherine Hoffman, and I help value-driven, ambitious women achieve their goals by setting artful, integrity-aligned boundaries that create space for meaningful work and sincere connection. So, are you ready to discover the power of no? Well, let's get started. Hey there, friends, and welcome to another episode of Ponder and Practice. Thank you so much for joining me here today. I hope that you are doing well and hanging in there and staying physically distanced and at home if you can, and certainly always wearing your mask over both your mouth and nose. Do it. Please, please, please. These numbers are bonkers and it's kind of terrifying, so please be careful. Please stay safe. Caution fatigue is super real, and I get that. And still, it's really important that we keep up with it. Today, the topic of this episode is how to keep boundaries in close quarters. And this kind of topic is one that I always struggle with because everybody's situation is so different, and certainly I know what I need as someone who is intensely introverted and fairly sensitive. I need so much time to myself. I need so much quiet, just because that's what it takes for me to fully process everything and be present out in the world. And feel rested and energetic and being able to give my full attention to whoever is in front of me. But I recognize that not everyone experiences life in this way. And so I'm going to walk through today several tools. There's 3 steps to this that I'm going to walk through. I encourage you to take what you hear through the lens of your own experience. I don't know what your home looks like. I don't know what your family situation is. And so, take some ideas from what I have. If there's anything that resonates, if you get any creative spark about, oh yeah, that would be really helpful, and go do that. I wish I could give personalized advice to everyone listening at the same time. And I do trust that whatever I say will be of the highest benefit to whoever happens to hear it. And so that is really the intention I'm putting into this. If I'm being completely honest, since I shifted the focus of the podcast, most of the episodes I have recorded 4 or 5 times, because maybe just because it doesn't feel quite comfortable yet to talk about things in this way. And putting together these thoughts feels very new still. And so all of that to say that I'm doing my best, and hopefully you take something away from this that, if you are also an introverted person and fairly sensitive, you're going to walk away with some great tips. If you're more of an extroverted person, I'm not sure how much you're going to get out of this, but certainly I can do my best. Typically the folks who need best boundaries that I've worked with are more introverted, but not always, certainly, but fairly consistently sensitive folks who feel fairly deeply and have a sense of responsibility that they just gotta show up in a very specific way, and they can't let anybody down. So I'm coming at it from that point of view. Hopefully that makes sense. At any rate, I do want to let you know before I get into the meat of this episode that I am going to be hosting a webinar on Tuesday, December 8th at 5:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and it is designed for boundary setting in the hardest of places, which is with your family. So the holiday time is really challenging in the best of times, just because we tend to if it wasn't a COVID time, probably we would all be traveling back home, our our families of origin, seeing maybe friends from high school or college, and revisiting those relationships and revisiting those patterns from those relationships. And it is wild to be put back in that space and feel those same feelings that you felt like when you were 12 or 13 or 15 or 18, and think, wait a minute, I'm a fully grown person now. What is happening? And our families are just really good at pushing our buttons very precisely and very specifically. And so in this webinar, my goal is to help you put a cover over your buttons so that you get to decide who has access to them. The mental image I carry is of like the big red self-destruct button in like a sci-fi movie, and there's always a cover over it so nobody bumps it with their elbow or something like this and accidentally blows up the spaceship. And so that's really my goal after this webinar, is that you will have that cover over your buttons, so that nobody else will get to them, right? Nobody's going to bump it with their elbow or anything like that. Practically speaking, what that looks like is that I've scheduled it for 75 minutes. It's going to run probably 45 minutes to an hour, but a massive pet peeve of mine is when stuff goes over, so I always schedule extra time. At any rate, 75 minutes, and you're going to walk away with stock phrases that are tailor-made for at-home conversations with your family. Stock phrases, I'm going to talk about more as we go, but are so important because so many folks just default to yes because they don't know how to say no. They don't have the words. And so I love, love, love stock phrases because you practice them before you need them, and you envision the situation in which you might use them. And then when that situation happens, you don't even have to think about it. It just falls right out of your mouth, and it's that easy, right? You've set a beautiful boundary that has created so much incredible space for meaningful and deep connection in a way that feels right to you and honors the person that you're talking to, right? So you're going to walk away with some stock phrases to help you do just that. You're also going to walk away with some tools to help you keep your emotions in check. Part of what makes family really challenging is that we're super reactive because these are such old, well-worn patterns, and not just the interpersonal dynamics, but neurologically, it's well-worn. And so our bodies and our minds and our emotions respond in very specific ways. And so I'm going to provide you with some tools so that you don't have that reaction. You don't flip right into whatever the habitual reaction is when Uncle Joe says that thing that Uncle Joe says, and you're like, ugh, please no. At any rate. And then the last thing is that so many people feel so guilty about saying no to their families, and so they don't. And so I want to help you nip that guilt right in the bud and realize that in fact your ability to say no and your ability to set good boundaries is of tremendous benefit to, yes, yourself, and also all of the people around you. So those are my big three things that you're going to walk away with. Probably there's going to be more, but definitely those three. So the stock phrases, how to keep your emotions in check in those really tough, emotionally charged conversations. And then also how not to feel guilty. You don't need to feel guilty at all. It's great to say no. It's so beneficial. It helps literally everyone involved. So again, like I said, it's going to be on Tuesday, December 8th at 5:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Go register. All you need to do is either tap the link in the show notes or click on it if you're on your computer, or you can head on over to artfulboundaries.com, and there is a link on the upper right hand side that says December webinar. And if you click that, it'll take you right to the registration page and you can get in on the action. I do encourage you, even if you can't make the live event, to still register, because I send out a really robust workbook to everyone who registers. So you will get access to the replay for sure, and also you will get access to the workbook and all of the information in a written form. And I spend a lot of time on them, and they're really good. And then I end up selling them after the fact as a separate product. So if you come to the webinar or if you register for the webinar, you will get it included in that price. So there's that. Super exciting. I love doing these. They're so much fun. And folks really do walk away with tremendous benefit, and it is so lovely to see. I can tell you, the folks who came to the last webinar I did, which was all about setting professional boundaries, everyone that I've talked to is like, oh my God, I use those stock phrases all the time. I have done video calls with a few of those ladies, and they like pull it off their cork board next to their computers, and they're like, look, see, I have it. It's pinned right up next to my computer, because then I just look at it when I need it, and I can use those phrases, and it's almost like a get out of jail free card for them, right? So really exciting, and it warms my heart to see folks being able to use the materials in that way. All right, enough about that. The topic for today is how to keep your boundaries in close quarters. How to keep your boundaries when it's like there's no, where do you go? What do you do? You're kind of on top of each other. Everything's happening at once. Maybe there's chaos. Maybe it's just as like, say maybe you share a studio apartment with your spouse and you're like, I love you, but for goodness sake, please get out of my face. But you only have a studio apartment. You can't go very far. I know for me and my husband, we get along fairly well and always have. Like we did a 2-week road trip a number of years ago, and at one point he looked at me and he's like, I have never spent this much time with someone ever. And he was like, I'm really not sure how we get along as well as we do. So there's that. And also this whole situation and heightened stress and anxiety around COVID has been a strain, and we don't live in a studio, we're in a home. So I know that for folks in any situation, whether you have a very small home with multiple people and you would really rather not, maybe you live alone and you would really rather have people around you, like whatever situation you're in, it can be really challenging. And especially now that we're in this winter season, like where the darkness has fallen, especially here in Portland, as the sun sets at like 4 o'clock. I've been watching it just turn to black outside as I record this. So it's tough. So there are 3 things that I'm going to walk you through, like 3 steps isn't the right word, but 3 aspects to figuring out how to set good boundaries for yourself when you're in like close quarters that you are dissatisfied with for whatever reason. The first is acceptance. And you may think, Catherine, that is not a strategy, that is not helpful. What is this nonsense? But, and I hear you, but it's really important. The reason is twofold. One, every single woman I talk to as a client, and even like in networking, like every single woman I talk to has tremendous amounts of judgment about the way they show up, the way they don't show up, what they do, what they don't do. It doesn't matter. There's so much shame and judgment and guilt about like existing, and that puts you in the opposite direction of wherever it is you're trying to get. I wrote an Instagram post a while back, or caption, that I likened it to, having self-judgment is like if you don't have self-judgment, like you're just going on a hike, right? Like say it's moderately inclined, not too much, like a little bit challenging, but not undoable, not impossible to do. But it's just like a regular hike, right? You're just out doing your thing. When you add self-judgment to the mix and you add like resistance to what is, and you pile that on, it's like you've taken the hike, made it at an incredible incline, like put bears and scorpions and snakes and pits of flaming death and like every terrible obstacle course thing that you could think of. You've added all that in, and you're like, I can't do this. Like, this is almost impassable. I cannot get past this. That's what self-judgment does. It makes living, right? And living has its challenges, and I'm not trying to downplay any of that, but living is like being on a hike, more or less, in this analogy or metaphor. And you're just kind of walking through, and yeah, there are some places that are harder, there are some places that are easier, but it's doable for the most part, excluding extenuating circumstance. And then you add self-judgment into that, and it, like, you can't, your ability to live and show up for life is so compromised because the weight you're carrying becomes so heavy. So acceptance is a way to clear the path and drop like that weight of like, gosh, I am not doing this right, and I can't do this right, and I'm the worst, and this and that. Accepting where you're at lets all of that fall away. It lets all of that pressure out. It's like a big release valve, and it can just, oh, yeah. It's like you can look at yourself and be like, yeah, I'm fine. Like, this isn't where I'm meant to be, but it's okay. I am fundamentally okay. So that's the first reason why acceptance matters. The second reason why acceptance matters is because if you're thrashing about thinking, and let me tell you, my friend, I have been there just recently, always, not always, but I'm not telling you anything that I haven't experienced myself, and I have no judgment about it at all. But if you're thrashing around and complaining and this isn't what it needs to be, and I'm not in the right place, and I can't get to where I want to be, and this is just the worst, and like on and on and on, you don't know where you are in terms of where you want to go, because you're in this, I was going to say maelstrom of chaotic thinking. And it's like if you get lost on a road trip and you just kind of keep driving around in circles, but it's like windy, so you're not really driving around in circles, but you're not getting anywhere. You're just kind of like round and round and round and round and round. Acceptance is like pulling out, like stopping the car, pulling out a map and looking and saying, oh, this is where I am. Okay, how do I get from here to over there where I actually want to be? So, acceptance is really important. And accepting every aspect of where it is that you happen to be is really important. Who you're with, who you're not with, what your home is, what your work situation is, all these things. Being able to take stock honestly and say, all right, this is what's up right now. Okay. That gives you the relief and space and ability to then make some decisions and make some choices. The other mental image that comes to mind is if you think about, like, maybe if you don't know how to swim, if you've ever been in the water and you kind of like thrash around, or if you've ever seen this in the movie, like somebody doesn't know how to swim and they end up tossed in the water or something and they like thrash around, and if you watch them, you're like, if you just moved your limbs like in synchrony with each other, you would stay afloat, but they're like thrashing and thrashing and thrashing, and so they can't stay up, and they can't swim. And so this is how I think of acceptance as well, being in the state of like self-judgment and guilt and shame and things aren't what I want them to be, and this is the worst, and like all this complaining and, you know, thrashing around. That's making you sink because you don't have an accurate sense of where you're at. You're piling on extra weight. And so as soon as you let that go, as soon as you say, oh, right, I am here and this is okay, this is what the situation is, and I maybe don't like it, but this is what it is. That is the equivalent of getting like instant swimming lessons. I mean, like, oh, right, I just got to move my arms in this way and kick and kind of stay more horizontal than vertical. And, oh, hey, now I'm moving. Oh, gosh, okay, like there's the edge of the pool or the shore, whatever it is. Okay, like now I'm getting there. So acceptance is the first thing. The second thing is to do some reflection. And there's a caveat here about acceptance as well. You can accept a state of being even if you're not quite sure what to call it, or if you don't know how to name it. And many folks are like, oh, I just feel off. Like, I don't really know what's going on or what this is, but I feel off. Okay. And then from that space, you can reflect and consider, well, what is actually going on here? What is happening? And if there's something you haven't yet been able to name, that gives you the time and space to be able to point at it and label it and say, oh, this is what this is, which can be very helpful. The other thing to think about is considering your resources, what you have or what you don't have. And when you know this leads into our third step, which I'm going to come back to, which is actually like getting creative and figuring out what to do. But first, you kind of got to know, well, right now, I have an abundance of whatever it is. You have an abundance of something. I promise you, you do. We all do. It may not be the thing that you wish that you had an abundance of, but there's something that you have enough of. And so call that out, be aware of it. Bring that to bear as you're doing this work. And then consider what's missing. What do you not have that you need? And get clear on that. You cannot set good boundaries if you don't first know clearly what it is that you're missing. Because if you can't articulate it to yourself, you cannot articulate it to anyone else. And sometimes that's fine. Sometimes you can kind of feel your way through if it's just something between you and you. But if you're in close quarters, likely you're going to have to say something to someone else in your space. So get clear. Do some intentional reflection and figuring out, what do you have? What do you not have? And this can be emotional, mental, physical, resource, whatever it is. There's no wrong answers. It's all good. But that clarity is going to serve you really well, because then you're going to be able to set a boundary, ask for what you need, and then get that need met ultimately. Another way to think about this, which is different but also similar, is what space or activities would help you refill those empty stores of whatever resources that you don't have. So for someone like me, who is introverted and sensitive and needs time and space to like feel things and process them and let them move, for me this is I need time alone. I need a door that I can close and be fully alone in a space. I need that. If I don't get that, it's not gonna be pretty. And in fact, a large part of my relationship with my husband, especially early on when we were living together, is figuring out, how do we navigate this? How do we make this work in a way that we both are able to have the time and space that we need? So at any rate, but thinking through it or coming to it from that lens of space or activity that you might need can be helpful, because it reframes it in a different way. Another thing to consider, which is also similar but different, is what relationships need more structure. Sometimes, especially with the people closest to us, we get kind of lazy because we are familiar with that person, we know them, and we just kind of take it for granted that they're there. Especially with spouses or romantic partners, after a while, you're just oh yeah, you're here, it's fine, whatever. And so we can forget that, oh right, I actually need this, that, or the other. I actually need words of affirmation. I actually need, quality time, whatever it is. I'm talking love languages here. And so consider in those relationships, in those close-quartered relationships, where has that structure kind of broken down, and where does it require some extra care and attention? Thinking about it in this way can give you some really, really juicy information about where to direct your boundary setting skills. And again, there's no wrong answers here. It's just something to think through and consider. And then all of these things that I've talked through so far carry into, well, how are you going to communicate that? Like I said, you are going to have to say something if it's a boundary that in any way relates to someone around you. you're going to have to say it. This is really scary for a lot of folks, and I get that, and that's why I am here to help you. This is part of what can be super helpful. If you've ever given a talk before and you practiced it beforehand, you probably felt a lot more confident going into it than if you were just like tossed into the spotlight or on the hot seat or whatever and you didn't have time to prepare. At least that's true for me and many of the folks that I know. This is the same thing, but for a conversation. So thinking through, okay, I know the resources I have available, I know the resources that I need, and I have a really good sense of where my boundaries would be best placed. So, who is impacted by this? Who is it that I need to talk to? And what am I going to say that is in alignment with my integrity, that speaks to my truth, and also honors that person in the best way that I possibly can? My caveat here is that yes, planning will be helpful because you will be able, just like stock phrases like I talked about, like having planned something and thought it through and rehearsed it, your side is going to go the way that you intend most likely. Sometimes it doesn't, and that's okay. But assuming that it does, the only caveat here is that the response that you get back is variable. And that can be really challenging, and that's where the fear comes in for a lot of folks. And it's worth considering as well, depending on your situation, depending where you're at, and what resources are available to you and what you need. There can be some very profound implications to speaking up in a way that's clear and that speaks to your truth, especially if you're in a dynamic where the other person or the other people are used to running you over, metaphorically speaking, and kind of ignoring you or brushing you under the rug, not really paying any mind to what you have to say. So, all of that just to say that planning makes a huge difference. Clarity makes a huge difference. And I am also very sensitive to the fact that when push comes to shove and you do actually say it, there are many different things that could happen. Of course, there's also the option that whoever it is like, oh yeah, totally. Like, I didn't realize you needed that. 100% on board, right? That's the ideal. And then of course there's any number of other reactions between like very serious, this relationship is done, through like, oh yeah, no problem, I got you, right? So, but the better able, the people who are closest to you, and so you typically can tell like what words are going to have the most weight here, what verbiage is going to be most potent in getting my point across effectively. And so doing some thinking about this and some thoughtful planning about this can carry you fairly far. So first we talked acceptance, being where you are, where you're at, and that's totally fine. Drop the judgment. There's no shame. There's no guilt. It's all good. There's nothing wrong. And then getting into reflection, figuring out exactly like what are those boundaries that you need and getting clear there and using that information to inform like, okay, who do I need to talk to about this, if anyone, and how am I going to do that in a way that feels right to me, that honors both myself and the person I'm talking to. And then the last thing is to go do it and get creative about it. We're in a time when like kind of anything goes. So, get creative. If, this is something I have written down on my little paper is, bathrooms and closets have doors usually. And if you need a space that is alone and no one else is in there, fair game. Like go be in those spaces. There's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes it's as simple as going for a walk outside and getting some fresh air. Depending on what it is that you need in your specific situation, it's going to look a little bit different. If you are strapped for cash, it's going to look a little bit different than someone who has financial resource. So, if you have financial resource, but you live in a city, that's going to look different than someone who lives like more in the suburbs or in a more rural area. So use what you have and get creative with it. There are no wrong answers at all. And if you're in a situation where the people around you are willing to listen to you, hear you out, work with you, negotiate, navigate it in a partnership team kind of style, which, yes, I hope that you're in that situation, you know, brainstorm, think it through, figure out like what might work here, and experiment. Once you set a boundary, once you say like, hey, I need 15 minutes by myself every day at the end of the day, okay, try it. If you're like, oh shoot, I actually need like an hour, okay, try that out, see how it goes. If with an hour you're like, yeah, but maybe I just, like, that's really tough for timing for dinner or whatever, let me try half an hour, great, do that. There are no wrong answers. This is all an experiment. The point of setting boundaries and the point of saying what you need, saying no, speaking your truth, such as it is setting up a space for meaningful connection and meaningful interaction. That is the point. And so if you set up a boundary and you're finding that your connection with other folks and yourself is actually impaired, okay, that's really good information. Let's try something else. It's totally fine. So keep that in mind and try different things as you go. I can tell you an embarrassing story, but one that should normalize any misgivings you might have about the boundaries that might seem kind of odd to you. So when I was in med school, I moved my desk literally into a closet, right? This is really embarrassing to talk about in a public space, but I did because, you know, I lived with my husband and he has 4 kids and they were in and out of the house and at different times, different days, like odd schedules, this and that. There's like noise and, you know, a full house, which objectively there's nothing wrong with that. For me though, like I said, like I need a lot of time alone. I need space to myself. It was like, I am going to go bonkers. I love these people tremendously. I would not trade them out for the world, but I'm gonna go bonkers if I don't get some space to myself. And when I don't get space to myself, that looks like my anxiety spikes, my depression spikes, you know, like I just don't feel well, I get exhausted, I can't show up in ways that are meaningful, I get irritable, like it's not a pretty picture. So for me, that looked like, all right, let's get creative. And one day I was looking at my closet and I thought, I wonder if my desk would fit in there. And I tried it and it did. And so, honest to God, my desk stayed in my closet for about 2 years. Yeah. And then just this year with COVID, have I been able to move it out. So, at any rate, you know, I share that and offer that embarrassment just to let you know that there are no wrong answers. If it makes space for you, if it opens up, and if you feel relief in entertaining different ideas, it's a right answer. Go for it, try it, see how it goes, and then reevaluate as you need to. So hopefully that helps. I know it's very general. Like I said up top, we're all in different situations. I know the extroverted folks, my husband included, he's going insane and just like wants to be around people and can't, and is like, it's very challenging for him. Whereas I am much more like, get out of my face. I need to not see anyone for like 36 hours. And that's not an option right now either. So we kind of got to do what we can with what we have. And it is super challenging, and you know, I have faith in you. You're a smart person. You're a creative person. You can figure this out. You got it. And you're doing so good. You're doing so good. My friend, please, if you take absolutely nothing else away from this episode, honest to God, take away the fact that it's okay to drop your self-judgment. It's okay to drop any guilt or shame that you feel and just be. You're doing awesome. Really and truly. Yeah, you are. I wouldn't lie. I would never steer you wrong. All right, friend. Well, the next episode is going to be on Friday, I think, after Thanksgiving. So I hope that you have a beautiful Thanksgiving. It's also Native American Heritage Month, so that's cool. And if you are interested, the email, I just sent out an email yesterday that had a whole bunch of resources for different ways to celebrate Native American Heritage Month, and looking at who used to live on your land, like whose land are you actually on in terms of tribes and tribal land and whatnot, and then also for like donation purposes, some different organizations to donate to if you're in a position to do that, and just some interesting things that I collected so that we can celebrate this time and this month in a way that honors everyone. All right, well, until next time, well, I should say, I will go ahead and put a link to my email in the show notes, and if you send me an email, I will send that that particular newsletter over to you. You can also subscribe to the newsletter if you go to ponderandpractice.com/free library, and you'll get a whole ton of resources. And then if I see that comes through, I will go ahead and send you that special resource email that I made. So, all right, that's all for real. And take good care, set great boundaries, and until next time, bye.